So today's all about the fundamentals of building connection with nature. We need to have a certain level of connectedness before communication is going to be possible. So we need to start here. Obviously, deepening our connection with nature is beneficial in a lot of ways. So the principles that I've got in there, I've placed 4 in there as sort of like a recipe for connection. And these are actually the 4 main principles that we work with on the quests as well. So the nice thing is that you can go as deep as you want with each of these principles, but they're still useful for even a shorter program like this. And it's really good. I find these principles really useful because they're really like the scaffolding. So anytime in the future, we might be doing other practices, or you might even have information or practices from different places that you've learnt. But you can always come back to, am I being more present? Am I being more relaxed and open? Do I feel my heart opening? And how can I cultivate energy? Because those are really the 4 foundational principles that you can actually, take action on, and there's practices associated with each of them. So given that there's only 4, it's easy to remember, even though there's layers and layers of depth. So like I said, the first one is about presence, about remaining in the now. And the second one I've got in there is relaxation. Those 2 kind of are even the most foundational of all those 4, because once you've got presence and you've got relaxation, you'll naturally find that your heart opens, and you'll naturally be cultivating your energy, even if you don't do any other practices. So, and we emphasize those in equal parts, presence and relaxation. So again, it's quite Taoist. A lot of everything from my training with Way of Nature, which is the lineage that I run the quests in, is heavily influenced by Taoism. And the core thing there is looking at the balance. So yin and yang is probably one of the most common Taoist concepts that we would have heard of. So in that way, presence and being in the now is a bit like the masculine principle, and relaxation, which you could also call receptivity or openness, is the feminine, the yin principle. And those 2, when you think about it, kind of have to go hand in hand, because it's very difficult to remain present if you're tense or uptight about something, because you're going to continually get distracted and be worrying about something that happened in the past, or worrying about something that might happen in the future. And likewise, relaxation only goes so far if you're not in the present moment either. I mean, even studies have shown that things like watching television, that we tend to think of as a very common form of relaxation, actually puts our body in a mild stress response. So diverting ourselves and distracting ourselves is not necessarily particularly useful for relaxation either. So I put in some words from my Way of Nature teacher. I put them in your workbook because he describes them quite well, and the way that he uses words kind of gives you a lot to contemplate. So for presence, I'll read this out for you as well. Become aware of your distractions. If need be, even meditate single-mindedly on the flow of your inner and outer distractions. Be patient. Over time, as you meditate regularly, the flow of distraction should begin to slow, allowing present-centered awareness to arise. Remain in that pure presence. Give more and more precise, clear attention to the now and here. Meditate on the exact instant of the present moment and the surroundings as you directly experience them. So the nice thing is with all that is that when you're in nature, nature makes it really, really easy to be present, because there's so much to look at. So it's quite different to going and trying to meditate in a clear room, looking at a wall or something, or closing your eyes and just focusing on your breath or something. Nature, even when you're not trying to meditate, you can actually still be being very present when you're there, taking in your surroundings. So it's kind of, one of the extra benefits that nature gives us is that it makes it very easy for us. I think in that description, it also comes through the role of the senses in all this, because it's really, if we're not placing our awareness on some form of sensory experience, then we're not being present, because our senses are how we directly experience the world. Using the term senses is maybe possibly a little bit simplistic, and later in this section I'll talk about the fields of experience instead of senses. But for the moment, you can just think about sensory experience. So you'll find as you go into your solo spots that hopefully you'll find it on this program, and also hopefully you'll continue the practice of going out into nature after this. But the longer you spend in nature in an undistracted kind of way, it's a really important part of it. So recreating or going for a walk with friends in nature is lovely as well, but you're not going to get the same kind of depth of experience if you bring, some form of distraction, whether it's a person or a phone or whatever with you. But you'll definitely notice that your senses become more refined. So the role of the senses is just absolutely fundamental, because if the senses are the door to experiencing life, if it's the actual literal way that we experience life, if our senses are constricted, which is what happens when we're bombarded with too much stimuli, our nervous system can't take all that. So it starts to dampen down the intensity and the level of information that it allows to come through the sensory systems, which basically means that we're closed off to experiencing everything that could be experienced. So, and if someone told me that before I did my first quest, I would have said, oh yeah, that makes sense. But it wasn't until I had spent that first week alone in nature that I realized just how far that goes, picking up on things that, ultimately I didn't even think would have been humanly possible. And it generally, it takes a couple of days. So maybe by tomorrow, if you're not getting too stimulated by other things at nighttime, you might notice that your senses are softening and opening, and it's wonderful because you can actually pick up on more and more and more of that beauty that we talked about yesterday. But it really is like to me, it's like a modern sort of illness. Like if our senses can't be open enough to really experience life, we can't be actually fully present with life. There's just so much stuff we're missing out on. It's kind of like, trying to feel things with our hands, but we're walking around through life with a glove on. So we think, I'm touching my desk or my cup or whatever, and I think that I'm experiencing it in all the ways that it is to be experienced, but I'm really not, because my sensory system is still too closed. So a lot of the practices you'll notice, in fact, all of them, I would say, if I think through it, is working with some form of either sensory input or fields of experience, as we'll talk about in a little bit. And you could partly look at those practices as, okay, well, this is a direct practice of connection with nature, but you could also see it as practicing enabling our sensory systems to open and pick up on more and more detail. So it's not simply a matter of, are you distracted or are you not? It's like presence is sort of like, it's a much more like multi-dimensional kind of concept. It's kind of like, you know, here's my cup and I'm looking at it, I'm feeling it. So in some ways I'm present with it and I'm directly connected to it, but I can deepen my presence to greater and greater and greater degrees. And it feels to me almost like I'm seeping myself into the object, or I'm gradually kind of wrapping myself around every single aspect that there is to be experienced. It's wonderful, isn't it? My teacher always says, boredom heralds the arrival of the teacher, which means that if you're getting bored, it just means that now's the time to learn something new, because there's no limit to how far this can go. Okay, so I'll move on to the next principle, which is relaxation, which, like I said, is the pair to presence. They kind of, you can't really have one without the other, which also means that you could focus just on one. But at some point you'll learn that the barrier to you going deeper with one of those principles will always be the other one. So you end up working on both, whether you like it or not. Definitely in modern Western culture, it's easier for people to embrace presence, because it's kind of this like, okay, well, I will myself to be very focused and only look at this thing. And it's appeals to the individualistic kind of, I create my own reality. If I want something bad enough, I can make it happen. But we apply that kind of thinking to ourselves. So it might be different for you guys over there, but I imagine there's probably some, aspect of that as well. But relaxation's sometimes more difficult for people to embrace, even though you think, well, it's lovely to be relaxed, isn't it? But at some level, people can be quite resistant or not able to accept the importance of the role of relaxation. So relaxation is nice for us, but it's not non-purposeful either. If anyone has those that story of needing to be productive sort of drilled into them a bit too far, there is definitely a reason, and you have full permission to practice relaxation all throughout this program. So relaxation, again, like presence, is sort of, it's not a, am I relaxed or not? There's levels and layers to it. I'm going to read you the passage in there as well. Deeply relax and profoundly surrender. To begin, first locate where you still hold contractions and tensions in your body, emotions, and mind. Then learn to decontract and relax your body, your emotions, and your thoughts and mind. Let go of old ideas, judgments, emotions, structures, your own expectations, your need for approval or acceptance, and your idea of progress. Over time, replace your old habitual patterns of automatic contraction to life with new helpful habits of meeting life with openness and letting go. So you see in there that it's not just about muscle relaxation or contraction. We think about relaxation as applying to all aspects of ourselves, including contractions that we hold in the mental and emotional landscape. Those things can be a lot more difficult to be able to feel into and get a sense of them as a form of contraction. And this again is where there's so far that you can go with these two principles alone, which, you could work with these for years and years and years and years. Certainly, this is not just about the few days on this program. So, but it's easiest to start with the body. So that's why when we're practicing Qigong, you're encouraged to notice a lot where you're holding tensions and contractions, and definitely begin with the body. Oftentimes, the deeper we go through the body, we can notice how those contractions that we notice in our physical body are actually connected to emotions or traumas, things that have happened to us in the past. And those are also often connected to contractions in our minds, like stories that we keep telling ourselves over and over and over. So multi-layered, you don't have to tackle all those layers at once. Just simply start with the most physical and the most tangible, the things that you can really feel. Because if you start trying to force yourself, then you'll be getting another form of contraction. So we've just got to try to work with what's arising in the moment for us. That's really kind of the only way to go about it. And we can do that directly through the body. So is that clear for everybody? Is there any reflections that people would like to add, how they've noticed presence and relaxation relating to their sense of connectedness?
Yeah, just as we were going through those 2 points just now, I was reflecting a lot on yesterday's session of sort of the connection between the two, in the sense that I think personally, on like an emotional scale, I tend to always go to these 2 extremes of either pushing it down, whatever I'm thinking about and whatever is causing whatever emotional reaction at the time, or fully sort of like engulfing myself into it. And I found myself thinking yesterday of when it comes to like, because it was like a new experience, right? And all these different thoughts and questions and stuff, like instead of trying, I reached a point when I decided to finally sit down, where it was like listening to sort of like the negativity in my head. Like I was telling them like how I was kind of like talk like down talking myself about at which point I was at, and kind of like sitting in that thought for a while and sort of like understanding why I was thinking that, and instead of like pushing it down or like letting it consume me, just kind of like being present in it and feeling my body relax sort of like naturally as it was happening. Like I think once I actually just like sat in it and sort of like writing in my notebook and stuff like that, I felt the two sort of like flow on its own without having to like really think about it as much, and the time sort of like went like that. So yeah, that was my experience. So just now what you were saying about those 2 points really resonated, made a lot of sense to me lah.
Very nice. It's very good insight. That feeling of either trying to push a thought away or letting it fully engulf us. You can really see those two at play. Like trying to push a thought away is not embracing the relaxation principle. Like we're sort of contracting against something, which makes it very difficult because it's always still going to be there and trying to distract us constantly. And then the letting something fully engulf us means that we're losing a sense of presence because that's being hijacked by the thought. Whereas that accepting that I am having these thoughts is what truly enables it to move, because in that acceptance, you're being present to the truth of what you're experiencing in the moment. And then that acceptance is also relaxing, allowing it to be and trying to force it or change it. So, yeah. Very good insight. Yep.
I'm just going to share to Emily. I think it would really help to find your outlet too. It doesn't necessarily want to be in writing. It can be anything. It can be drawing, because sometimes it's just not rational thoughts. You can actually express it in different ways. Drawing, painting, even just moving.
Okay, so we're going to work with one of our senses, one of the fields of experience, which is sound. And this practice is a really easy way to get that sense of both presence and relaxation working together, as well as opening that sensory field. I often find that this practice really helps in getting a much finer grain awareness onto the field around me. So for the listening meditation, you can close your eyes to do it. There's a lot of the practices that we do are open eye, but this one's closed eye, which does help. If you're struggling with getting distracted, this is a really good one to do because it's really closing down the level of other input that you have. So get yourselves comfortable for the practice. And again, it could be done standing up if sitting down is going to be too uncomfortable for you. I don't mind, any posture is fine. Usually it helps to be able to sit up straight and have your breathing unrestricted, so you don't want to be bent over in any way. But other than that, it's good. Great. And close your eyes. You can relax your shoulders away from your ears. Soften the face, soften the hands, soften the feet. And just paying attention to your breathing for a few moments. Noticing its rhythm, the smoothness of the breath flowing in and out. And now paying particular attention to the sound of your breath. Maybe you can hear just a gentle whisper as it flows in and out of the nose. And then paying attention to sounds immediately around you. Maybe it's other sounds in the room, sounds behind you. And then take your awareness to sounds slightly further away. So sounds well outside of the room. And make sure that you're listening to all sides. So listening to sounds in front of you, behind you, to the left, to the right. Sounds lower than you, sounds higher than you. Beginning to sense into the full sphere of sounds around you. Just allowing the sounds to come to you. Noticing if you're trying to reach out and label any sounds. Just try to keep your awareness just placed at your eardrums. Just letting the sounds come to you and experiencing them as a pure sensory sensation. Now listening for sounds really far away, sounds almost beyond your ability to notice them. Not trying to work out what each sound is. Just direct, pure experience of sound. Now taking in all layers of sound all at the same time. So taking in sound from your own body, from the room, from all depths outside, experiencing all sounds simultaneously. And then begin to draw your awareness back closer to you. So taking your awareness to sounds just outside, and sound in the room. And finally, drawing your awareness back into yourself, listening to the sound of your breath. Just be present with your breath for a few minutes to gently close the practice. And then you can slowly open your eyes. So how did that feel for everybody?
I'll share then. I really enjoyed it, and I think the layering was really wonderful. I think I've gotten so used to the kind of ambient noise here, but then doing the layering, I could learn to distinguish different sounds, and I guess it was really cool to get a sense of, oh, there's a guy on the motorbike on the village road, and things like that. Then having that sense of that person on that journey, and then so it felt, rather than see it as just ambient noise, it felt more personal. So I enjoyed that.
Thanks.
And then also,
yeah.
When you said tune into, directly to your eardrum, I think it's always easy with the breath in meditation, because I don't know, I guess the breath is always used as the point, focus, but to shift to the eardrums was really cool.
Yeah.
It's like, what? I never thought of that.
Yeah. There's so many different ways that we can use our awareness with always slightly different effects. But it also, like, for me, it always shows me how much the mind is tuned to be constantly making meaning of things. So even on a pure sensory level, our sensory system's always trying to pick out the things that are salient. So, you know, in your case, things have become background noise because you've learned that certain noises you don't need to pay attention to because they're harmless. So our sensory systems are constantly trying to, you know, be able to put other things aside so that we only use our energy for things that are most relevant to us, which is, you know, not a bad thing, but it also means that we're habitually ignoring certain aspects of our experience. So practices like this are also helping us just develop that flexibility and pliability in how we can choose to use our awareness.
At one point, actually, as I was tuning into the layers, it felt very loud. It's like, oh, that is loud. Wow.
Yeah, it's sort of like, I think the biggest warning that I should put on, especially doing, you know, the quest, where on those longer solos, your sensory system just becomes so much more refined, as it does make going back, especially for poor people who have to live in a city, can make going back to a city environment just really too much overstimulation. But yeah, the listening meditation, I often do that first, you know, as one of the first practices, because it is quite an easy thing to get a hold of. And we practice the same kind of way of using our awareness when we do an open gaze meditation, like you did this morning in Qigong. But it's, I think, because we're quite vision dominant, most people are, that it can be very difficult to be able to break out of that habitual pattern of paying attention and looking and focusing on one particular thing. And we do the same thing with sound, but it seems to be easier for people to be able to shift into just taking in the full field with sound. So it's a good one to begin with. It's also a really useful one to use. You might be able to feel now that you feel a bit more calm and centered and present. And, you know, that happens quite quickly when you do this meditation. So great one to keep practicing. You know, if you go out to your solo sites and you feel that it's very difficult for you to remain undistracted, that you can have that one in your toolkit to bring you into the moment and just shift your state of being so that you're ready for connecting with nature. Great. Connection sequence. Wanted to cover that one off for sure. So you've got this one in your workbook. So like I was talking about with presence and relaxation, these aren't two-dimensional concepts. There's depths to it. And so the connection sequence sort of captures that. Now, these are just words that are pointing to something that's going on. So you don't need to look at these 6 levels of connection and think that, you know, this is really exactly how it is. But the whole point of having this connection sequence is simply to try to describe how there is increasing layers and depths to connection. And there's no expectation about how far you need to try to go. You don't need to try to get anywhere. This isn't about giving yourselves an expectation or a goal even. It's mostly just to say that, you know, you might go out on your solo site and, I mean, even I can hear from the sharing already, you're experiencing greater connection. But it's kind of to say, okay, just because you get a nice feeling doesn't mean that there's not further to go. So I sort of put the connection sequence in to be able to give you an invitation for you to keep exploring and wanting to go deeper with it. So I won't get too hung up on describing each of the stages of connection, but essentially you're moving through a process of, you might even begin by noticing that you're not present and you're disconnected, and then you can use your senses in a skillful way to begin entering that doorway of connection. So I'm like, oh, I haven't noticed my houseplant in the corner over there for a long time, forgotten it's there. So I, start to really look at it and, okay, there we go. I'm connected to it in a way. But the longer you can sit with that experience, you might begin to feel a sense of commonality with it. You feel a sense of bonding or love. But at that level of what we call communion here is there's still, I'm still very much aware that that's the plant and this is me. It might be possible at some point in time that you actually can drop into a sense of complete unity, where you might feel like you're actually, you might know technically that this is my body and, that's that plant, but actually your sense of it is that it doesn't feel like there's any separation or any difference between the two physical beings. And so that stage we would call unity. If you get to have that kind of experience now on this program, it will be absolutely incredible. So no pressure to, try to get to a certain step. And from there, that sense of unity might open up into experiencing unity with every single thing around you. And you might even then get a sense of what's underlying all of this, where are all these forms arising from, which for us and in Taoism we'll call source awareness, could call it God consciousness, the great mystery, this unifying field of energy that is the creator of everything and is also the field in which everything's arising in. Won't try to explain that in too much depth right now because that's not quite the topic of this program, but I did want to include it to show you just the extent that this kind of thing can take you to. So a world of discovery. We also, again, it's the senses that really enable this connection. So I'm trying to ram that point home so that you continue practicing and using your awareness through your senses in different ways. So you've got, there we are, the 9 experiential fields in your workbook as well, which I've briefly mentioned earlier. So they're kind of, they're not pure physical senses. Like when we say senses, we think of our physical senses, but there's different ways that we can sense life that aren't what we normally think of as our physical senses. So it does start obviously with the normal 5 senses of sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. Those are pretty obvious. But then there's also our internal senses or interoception. So the sense of movement, balance, information that we're sensing from our organs, all those things play a really important role, and science is sort of catching up with all that at the moment, telling how much information, like more nerves go up into the brain from our body than go the other way around. So the information that we get from our body is really, really, really important to how we function. We also have the field of energy. So obviously you were practicing that this morning in Qigong. So energy is a field of experience. So some of you noticed that you could start to feel a little bit of energy in your hands or at your bubbling spring points. more and more, the more sensitive you get, you'll realize that there's so much information that we can get from the energy fields and our sensation of it. There's also, the last two are probably the hardest ones to get. So the field of thoughts and the field of emotions. They're usually the hardest ones to get because we can more be in a habit of identifying with our thoughts or emotions. So that sense of when we get engulfed by thoughts can often mean that we're not experiencing thoughts as a field of experience that we are witnessing, but we get taken over by them, and that's what we're identifying with at that moment in time. However, you might find that this becomes something that you can practice with on your solos, and it is a good thing to practice because it is so easy to get swept up by them. But our field of thoughts and our field of emotions, the way we work with them in the context of nature connection is that, so for example, if I had a wonderful tree at my spot that was a big part of my solo experience, I would be observing what emotions are coming up as a direct result of the connection with this tree. So in that way, you're experiencing the field of emotions as part of your experience of connection. Can be very difficult to observe, and same with thoughts. So what thoughts arise out of the connection with this tree? And the practice really is to then not get swept up in them, but to be able to stay in that witness aspect of the self and observe how all this is unfolding. So that's a bit of maybe an extension kind of practice, but some of you in the room might actually be at that stage of being able to use that field of experience to explore connection as well. Okay. So the way you work with these fields of experience is you can use them to become present in your sight. So whether you have just arrived or whether you're noticing that you're getting distracted, you can use those fields of experience to make sure you really are in the present moment. And you can also directly work with them to deepen your connection. So for example, this tree in my solo site, I could progressively work through each of these fields with this one being of nature in my site. And so that's a way of helping deepen your connection with one particular being. And of course, you can also use the fields of experience like we did with the listening meditation. You can also just practice open awareness. So you're becoming aware of all the sensations. So you're not necessarily applying it just to one particular being. I would definitely not recommend trying to do all of them at once. It can be a lot even just to try to have your awareness resting on two. So if you want to play with that from the listening meditation, you might then move into opening your eyes. So you're adding sight to the experience of sound. Or touch is probably the next easiest one to sense. And so you could be practicing your listening with your eyes closed, and then you could be tuning into any sensations from the ground that you're sitting or standing on, the touch of wind against your cheek or a sense of temperature. So also infinite combinations of how you could use the fields of experience to deepen connection as well, which is going to be the topic of your next solo, which we'll go out to in just a moment. So I just did want to check in to make sure everything from that just made sense. So were there any questions about the 9 experiential fields or the connection sequence, and how to use that on your solo. I would also definitely encourage you practice standing meditation this morning. So I'm going to give you the specific task of practicing your standing meditation in your solo spot this morning. So to recap, you'll be standing up, you'll point your palms out to the sides, have your feet together, and very much practice open gaze. So you want your eyes to be softened, and just pay attention to, am I taking in everything from my field of vision? So one thing you can do, it's good, I've got my hands where you can still see them. So when your eyes are pointing straight ahead, you can use your thumbs and just notice how far out you can take your hands. Am I still being able to notice my thumbs in my peripheral vision? And so slowly move them further back. And you can also do that up and down as well. And that's one way of helping your field of vision widen at the same time. So you can practice that before you go and do your standing meditation. That's just one little tip to help you practice that. So yeah, I encourage you to do that on this solo, and then see how you feel drawn to play with those experiential fields. Either use them in a very open field sense, or pick a being of nature that you're going to explore every single field with. Great. That is your task. So you'll have, again, we'll meet back in an hour. So it would be 11:20. I'm assuming everyone now knows where their buddies are going, which is good. So yeah, we're making sure that when we get back, also keep a lookout for our buddy as well. Yeah, I'd love to hear from a couple of people how that went for you, if you tried any of the sensing practices.
Okay, afternoon. So I just share my experience. So when I heard about this training, partnering with nature, I'm really excited to go to my old place, 2019 maybe. So yesterday, I go there, down there, near the fish pond. Seems like no one going there, so I just go there. Then when I arrive there, everything looks still same with the previous one, and everything look dark there because there are so many tall trees there, and the size of the area is quite big. It's like basketball court. So I try to find my spot. It takes me like 5 to 10 minutes to really can sit there properly, because my eyes keep watching every angle. I don't know, because maybe there's no one there, and the place is quite dark, and I feel I need to like find a really good spot for me to sit. Then when I already sit there and I feel like I'm not really comfortable with my position, there are so many things in my head. I feel like I need to go somewhere else. So I just sit there like 20 minutes before I move, because I still remember what Nick Peckley mentioned to us yesterday about the spot. If you feel not uncomfortable about the place and you feel cold, maybe you should find another place. Because I feel maybe because they, it's not like they don't want me to be there. Maybe just not the right time. So I find another place. So I go behind there, the pineapple farm. So I found a new spot. So I sit there, and I feel it's totally different. I feel safe there, and I feel I can close my eyes. I can hear the ambient sounds. And this morning I also go to the same place because I think I feel calm there, and I can enjoy I can connect the nature. But when I sit there like 30 minutes, I feel like why not I go there again? I mean the first one because maybe the morning the atmosphere will be different. So I feel like I should go try again at the morning, but I don't know because there are so many mixed feelings. Then I feel never mind. Maybe I can go for the next day. Yeah. Hopefully I can go there again before this training finish lah. Yeah, I really hope so.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to just pick one of those spots, and as long as the place is happy for you to be there, just pick one of them and stick with it. Because even if you're feeling a bit of fear with the first spot, you know how you're saying you're looking at everything, maybe because no one else was there, you could also use that as your relaxation practice. So like I said, you know, we have contractions even in our emotional body. So that's one way of practicing relaxation to help you be more present in the place, is seeing if you can just relax the fear or the distractedness or whatever place that feeling like you can't settle or feeling like you want to move around, wherever that comes from. Because all that is sort of part of the it's part of the practice, and it's also part of learning to come into relationship with nature. It'll feel different all the time, and sometimes it does feel like that. So it's kind of trying to stay with it long enough so you can get to the bottom of, you know, why is it difficult to feel like I can settle and connect and relate in this one particular spot.
Yeah, so yesterday, when I was finding my spot, I pretty much used the yin approach. It kind of just called out to me anyways. So I just keep following that presence. And as I went down deeper, it was just pretty much where we at, just right below. And then when I came to it, it was quite a bit of a struggle to get there. But when I found the spot, it was pretty much like a fallen tree, which I thought was a fallen tree, like this. And here's like a small ravine, and then it grows upwards this way, which was a bit strange for me, but I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And when I asked for permission, it felt very hesitant, but it's not like pushing me away. It's just kind of like, sure, if you can, kind of thing. And then eventually I waited, but yeah, I sat there and I still couldn't go all the way to the halfway point where it's truly hanging off, because I guess the fear was there. But yeah, yesterday it was quite uncomfortable finding the right spot, but slowly adjusting. But then today I was quite excited because it felt like it was quite welcoming. So I went there really quickly and I didn't even look straight. I just kind of looked down and my feet just kind of walk, and eventually I reached there anyways, just based on the sense where it was. And then when I got there, it should have said, okay, come to the middle now and just go for it. And then I went there, just face the fear, right? Because you're like trying to fall off. But then it kind of like is very trusting in saying, look, if you fall and hit your face, I'll still catch you. So just go with it, right? And then I went there, sit there, and I meditated and I listened. And all I could hear was my heart pumping in my ears. But then as I slowed down my heart rate, everything was very serene and quiet. And I really felt at peace and really one with the spot. And it was so nice. And then when I opened my eyes, just like everything was lush, and I was like, okay, how far can I go? And it's like, okay, now lie down, right? Because sitting, at least I have some balance. But then lying down, I was like, okay, if I turn this way, I fall. I turn this way, I fall. So, but I just kind of like trusted it, and it was so comfortable. It was like rock solid, but like really good for my back because I have like spinal problem. And then I lay down and I closed my eyes and listened again, and hearing all around me. And then I heard a rustle on my right, And now I was like, oh shit, it's like a snake or something, so I have to check. But then I didn't saw anything. I looked carefully. I was like, and then it was just an ant on a leaf, which like blew my mind, because like how could I have listened to an ant like scurrying, right? And then I was like, I looked at it again, so I don't hear it, but I was very clear I heard something else. It could be something else, but oh well. Let's just say it's the ant. And then then I got up and check out the tree more, because that was after yesterday. I decided to really see what the tree was, how it got there, and whatnot. Like I said, it was a fallen tree, which I thought it should be still and broken, right? But this is growing upwards, so I was like, is it still alive? So I went to the head of the tree, and I just kind of like knocked in and say, hey, are you alive? And then the huge leaf whacked my face. And I was like, okay, got it. Yeah, so I really feel one with tree. But the next step, I think, is trying to do the qigong pose, but like standing in the middle. It's like really balanced, because so far I'm just like sitting and lying down. I haven't stand up yet. And also trying to smell, because I smell nature and leaves, but I'm not really sure what I should be smelling in terms of like the different layers. Because if I like sight after the ant, I start noticing like the algae growing, smaller insects, the moss, the more micro things, but all the smells are still the same. So I'll try that out the next one around.
I think very nicely pointed out. I think I've got that in your workbook, but I'm reading it. Yes, one of the little tricks, even though we're working with these, fairly basic principles of presence, relaxation, energy cultivation, as well as opening the heart, it doesn't need to be complicated. And one of the tricks for unlocking all of that is simply playfulness and curiosity. And I think you sort of demonstrated that really nicely, of like, if you follow what you're curious about, seeing, how nature wants to play with you, because it often is quite a playful kind of energy, that, you go deeper and deeper into presence and relaxation, which you could hear in the story just then really nicely of you were very much relaxing into the fear of losing your balance on that tree, as well as becoming a lot more present to what was around you. And you could hear the story of how the senses were becoming sharper and all that, sort of without really trying to like do the principles, but just through a natural unfolding of following that playfulness and curiosity. So yeah, that's a good story, I think, for everyone to hear, in that it's not meant to be hard work. There's definitely a lot more emphasis just on the being part of it rather than the doing part. Practices kind of help us to get a feel for a certain way of being, but they're just that, practices, and ultimately it's when we can just be and embody the principles that it's seems to be in the most ease and flow. So there's a question in your workbook that you can fill in just in your own time now, fairly briefly, which is, when do I feel my most connected in nature? And so it's an invitation for you to reflect on what are the inner and outer conditions that are present when you feel you're most connected. And I know that, I will have put some words in your head now, but feel free to use your own words to describe those inner and outer conditions. So just a few minutes in your own time to fill in that question. So I'd love to hear from a couple of people on your reflections. When do you feel you're most connected in nature?
In terms of my inner conditions, I said when I come with my offering. What is my offering? Well, it's to come with yearning, but at the same time peaceful. To come, yes, needful, but in a frame of listening. terms of the outer conditions, I think it's when everything is in flow, when nature is in full flow, I feel more, I suppose. Maybe it's only I notice more, but the elements, there's some kind of drama in the elements, in the wind, in water. And I get very powerfully affected watching waves on a beach. Claire, when you were doing your qigong, there were the breaker on the line of the coast behind you. It was amazing to watch that breaking slowly behind you, just as a white line. And we were so far away, we couldn't, but at the same time, I was like, oh, feeling that.
Yeah.
I think for me, plants are very important as well as animals. I noticed that today as well, how much I was, yes, it was beautiful for me to have those birds and insects in motion, but I was really attracted to plants. And I realized that I like really old plants. And then I also like really young plants. So I don't know, I wrote that down. Yeah, I like lots going on and lots of sounds, you know, the orchestra that we were hearing about earlier, as well as the motion picture. I love it when a bird or an animal is either doesn't notice or does notice, but doesn't care, or is whatever, decides to perform its life right in front of you or even on you. It's the most amazing experience. And then I like a flash of smell. And for me, especially the smells that are like the cycles of nature. There's a smell, you know, there's a smell of wood rotting or something like that. That's something that matters a lot to me. And then, you know, when do I feel most connected? I mean, when there's few mosquitoes, it makes a big difference.
I can understand. Yeah, thanks, Ken. I like that you started with, you come with your offering. That's definitely one of the things that I wanted to mention in this section. So you brought it up, so it's perfect segue, is about reciprocity. And it's kind of like, just like when we're, you know, developing a relationship with another human, it's kind of the same for the non-human beings as well. It's like it needs to be a give and take in balance for that relationship to be healthy and for both parties to want to deepen it. So just having that attitude of, you know, what am I offering nature is quite important. And it doesn't necessarily need to be some sort of physical, tangible thing, although you can think of offerings in that way as well. But just even that, yeah, that attitude of offering some of your own good energy is a part of it too, which Qigong kind of does embody in that way, and that it's you're not just sort of trying to take from nature. It's actually a flow of energy in and out, and you can offer your energy back down to the earth or across to that tree or however you like to use it. The other thing I wanted to reflect on from what you just said then was that you felt most connected, I think you said, when there was a need, which is quite a, I was wondering if someone would bring that up of like, yeah, sure, there's when our own inner condition is in balance and harmonious, that is very helpful. But also when we're in need of something, one of my teachers would always say, the greater the need, the greater the result. So we'll often find, especially when we get into the communication part of nature, when there really is a need, when there's an important question or an important, any form of assistance that we need for something that's not just about ourselves, especially when it's for something that's for the greater good, that's when we'll get the most back as well. And we'll experiment a bit with that when we practice some questions this afternoon. I mean, I was even the other day, I went for a walk and I'd been working pretty hard last week and I was feeling quite exhausted, and I was walking through a little bit of forest that I hadn't visited before. And although I was like too tired to really kind of do any particular practice, you know, the time that I felt most connected was when there was these type of trees that drop kind of like pine needles, but they're not spiky. So, you know, so many things in the Australian bush are spiky, but when these leaves / needles fall, it actually makes quite a soft bedding on the ground. And then every time I look at it, I just want to lie down and go to sleep. And that was definitely the case the other day. So I just wandered off the trail. Didn't seem to be anyone else walking through there. I just got my coat and laid on the ground, and just that feeling of being held and, you know, nature wanting to support my rest. You know, something as simple as that can be the kind of need that really deepens that feeling of connection. And yeah, loved it. Is there anyone else who'd like to share their response to that question?
When do I feel most connected to nature? Being in thought out, what's inside is the curiosity, but main thing is with which element I feel like connected to is the wind, the air. So I always have this curiosity of where did the wind come from, where do they go, and how do they bring like this and that to here and there. So that's always been my curiosity. And then outside, it's like hearing a message from the wind comes from the ocean. So they have different smell, and what do they bring to you? For me, I like walking. For example, here I like walking at the top deck there, because that's where I get more wind blowing towards me. So that's currently a favorite spot of mine. And also it gives me the view of the clouds moving when I face the mountain. So few of my curiosity on how the wind moves is one is I see the clouds. So I'm always like, every time I see myself looking at the sky, looking at the clouds, and what are the shapes and how they form somewhere. So all the movement, it becomes like, I feel like connected to them for some reason. I don't know. Yeah. But so sometimes when at home, I listen to like the message that they bring. Like, it's not like a message that you hear from thought, but it's more in the sense that I feel like even though it's hot and then there's wind, I know it will rain sometime soon. So depending on the temperature and also like how the wind blows, I know from which part of the rain will come. So sometimes I see it visually, and when the rain come, or from the mountain, usually I can see like rain, and then depending on when the wind blows, I will have a feeling it will come towards me or it goes away from the place. So I'm not sure. I think that's how I think I'm connected to the wind.
As you're speaking, the wind really picked up here. Had to lean forward to try to listen to you. You were talking about your curiosity a bit, and maybe you saw the last question there about answering what are we curious about in nature, which is a question for you all. It's kind of like, as we're about to wrap up this building connection section of the program, and I just wanted to put that as the last question, because it's the way that you could go about continuing to develop your connection in your own time. So you could go out and find something that you're curious about your solo spot, and, you know, actually then go and do some research about, you know, maybe it's actually quite a physical, like scientific, whether it's about biology or about physics. You could actually follow that thread of curiosity to learn more about what's in your spot. And then when you go back out to sit there, and you can pick a sit spot close to where you live, so you can kind of continue the practice. So you can go in and out of like the intellectual, like learning about something and knowing the details, and then back into the embodied felt sense of it. So that thread of connection can really be amazing. In fact, if you've seen the movie or the documentary, My Octopus Teacher, it's beautifully shot, and there's so much behind it, because actually some of my teachings, the guy who was in that movie actually has done a lot of work with a teacher from one of the kind of lineages that I've been a part of. And so I can hear the framework of understanding about nature connection is actually sitting in the background behind this whole documentary. And they've done it so well in that you don't even notice that you're being taught about nature connection. But I think now that we've gone over a bit about sit spots and developing relationship with nature, if you watch that movie, you'll actually see how much of that is actually in that film. This guy with the octopus definitely learns a lot through this, following his curiosity. And yeah, the film is just beautiful, and how it sort of shows the relationship that develops.